let's talk. So here we are. We started it because of COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
COVID's done. We're back to classes. We're back doing conventions. We were just at the AAM a couple weeks ago. We're back, mingling and seeing each other in person. So why do we keep it going? If it's stressful, because it is stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Is it more stressful for me?
Yeah.
It is, right?
Yeah.
It is. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Not to take away that there's not a lot of responsibility on YouTube, because there is. But I think when you're the one in front of the camera, because it's usually me in front of the camera, you guys get to stay back there. You can look like shit.
Yeah.
Right? You can come in, your hair can be a mess and no makeup, and you sit back there in the shadows and no one sees you. And even on days like I have a migraine, or I don't feel good, or I'm feeling like depressed, or dealing with stuff, like, you have to sit down here and you have to deliver a good podcast, because you always have to keep a few in the pipe, meaning you always have to be, I like to be 4 ahead in case we do get sick or something happens, we're traveling and we can't do a live one. You don't want to run out of podcasts, because I think being consistent is key. And we have been consistent. 50 podcasts. So we're consistent. And that is very, very stressful, to stay consistent. And every 2 weeks, you have a new podcast that is exciting and interesting, to give to your peeps, to launch for your peeps. So why do we keep doing it?
It's fun.
It's fun, and I think that the community enjoys it. We're no longer as isolated as COVID made us, but we're not back to 100% where we were pre-COVID. So I think that, like, having this access to education and, like, a sense of community in the PMU world, like via a podcast like this, is really nice.
Yeah, I agree. And you think it's fun?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it gets you guys away from the computer and your everyday work that we do here at Girlz Inc.
Yeah.
I think it's a great resource of education and support for permanent makeup artists. I think we're awakening people to some things. And I'm going to talk about that. I got an Instagram voicemail last night. And it's so funny. You get messages just when you need them most, right? Because I had been feeling, I've been suffering with, migraine, heavy workload. When I get into a migraine, I've been in like a 2-week migraine. You can't work as efficiently. Your workload gets heavier. You feel like you're getting farther and farther away, from, you're not going to make your deadlines and whatnot. And you can start feeling, depressed, overburdened, overwhelmed, overloaded. And that's not a good feeling. And you're not feeling your best self. And I knew we were doing this today, and I was hoping to God I woke up, and I felt pretty good, and I do. So, but I got this voice message last night on Instagram, and she's from New Zealand. She listens to these podcasts. I'm not going to say her name because I don't know if, I don't know if they're okay with me saying their name, but she is from New Zealand, and she said she had just finished listening to the podcast with Clarissa. Clarissa's over in the UK. Stefania, ombre brow blush. Her pigment line is blush to bold. And on that podcast, we talked about pixels. And Clarissa, man, I mean, she is the queen of ombre brows and queen of pixels. She was one of the first people that really mastered that pixel and was doing these beautiful pixels. And and here we are 3-4 years later, pixels got super hot and trendy 3-4 years ago. The podcast was, a few months ago. So it's been like 3 years or so. And we had a really super honest conversation about pixels. And Clarissa was talking about how she worked so hard to get pixels for that fresh picture, but they just don't hold up during the healing process. Like, you don't really see them in the healed result. Looks like a powder brow. And so this young artist, she's like, I'm a newbie. And my pixels, they weren't there in the healed result. And I just started feeling really defeated. And I felt like I was doing something wrong. And I just got hard on myself. And I'm watching, I see all these pixels on Instagram. And I'm just thinking that I'm not getting it right. I'm doing something wrong. And then I listen to you and Clarissa's podcast. And I was like, mind blown. You don't even know what that did for me. And listening to, I played the voicemail for you, and it almost like this big, huge weight, this burden was lifted off her, because in that moment she realized, no, most people, most times, pixels are not healing in the skin. You're not seeing them in the healed work, So that's what this podcast does for a lot of artists. I think it awakens them. I think it turns them on, or at least gets them curious to new things, bigger needles, different products, different techniques, different ways of doing things. And what I like that she mentioned also, and the way she said it with her New England accent, it was very cute. It's like when we say bullshit, it's like bullshit, right? It sounds like bullshit. It's like funny how messages appear like right when you need them most, right? And that was her message. And that happens to me all the time. So thank you to her out there, and a big shout out to New Zealand. I love you guys. We had a lot of followers in New Zealand, so it's fantastic. And in that message, she also said that she had told a colleague of hers in New Zealand about the podcast, and to follow the podcast, to follow our page, because we keep it real. And so that's just the whole domino effect, right?
Yeah.
So
Seeing it spread
makes me super happy.